always find, good, useful information and what I present. It was kind of funny. I told my husband, Jim, which I'm sure some of you realize, we work together with our Metabolic Code projects here. And I'm sure many of you have listened to his webinars. And I was telling him it was about superfoods. And he said, oh, it's like Batman versus Superman. Who wins? They're both good guys. So that's why I kind of added a little tagline, like, what's better, acai or broccoli, So there's a lot of hype around superfoods. I think it's valuable to know where they help or not. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they not worth the money? There sure is a lot of headline, media coverage on superfoods, and I just think it's helpful as practitioners to kind of know some additional scoop and information on it. So with that, let's just delve right in and move on to our first slide and get started. So first of all, what is a superfood really? I think we all get the idea. It's like something extra special that we get out of these different foods, some of them exotic. Sometimes we've seen lists of the not so exotic, but yet they're still can be touted as a superfood. So basically a superfood is just anything that does have supposedly special health building characteristics to it. In general, what you really find is that what a superfood is a really nutrient-dense food. Most of them, to be honest, the claims are that they're high in antioxidants. And, the general public, the average consumer, layperson, has an idea now that, antioxidants fight free radicals and that this is something that's good for us and good for our health. So what we have to understand is that superfood is a marketing term. It's not any kind of an official a defined word, and it's not allowed as anything on a USDA food label. So right now you won't see it there. You just see it in articles and things like that on online nutrition information. Actually, it's interesting that the European Union banned the use of this term quite a few years ago because it implies a claim. If something is superfood, super great for our health, well, if something's being claimed to be that, how is it good for our health? Why is it good? Is there evidence, for the claimed benefits of these foods? So they actually banned the use of the term. We can move on to the next slide. And again, here it's a marketing term. So, superfoods can be very expensive, and so this is one of the reasons that we need to really, as practitioners, have a grip on what really are any benefits of these things. And, so if it comes up in conversation, we can speak knowledgeably with the patient. In general, I will tell you up front, there's nothing wrong with eating most of these, more nutrient-dense foods. Obviously, it should be encouraged. But they are expensive, so are they worth the money? When would they be? When would they not be? And the other big issue that will come up is, what are we eating with that superfood or not? Well, if it's mixed in or if it's pure and so forth. So let's start in. Probably one of the foods that started it all was acai on my next slide. It was kind of one of the first official superfoods that we started hearing a few years ago a lot about. I remember, drinks and beverages showing up with acai in it. And, didn't take very long for it to show up in Costco even. So I remember kind of searching the acai online and trying to figure out, what is it? Where does it come from? So it's native to Brazil. That is where the vast majority of acai, in fact, as far as I know, all of it comes from. And it is a really nutrient-dense food, so it kind of does fit this Superfood definition, if you want to think of it in terms of, an extra nutritionally dense, nutrient-dense food. It's very rich in anthocyanins, the same phytonutrient that's in a lot of berries and other plant foods, but it's very, very rich in them. In fact, it has been tested, and it does have very high ORAC values. I didn't put an ORAC value because depending on how it's processed and made, that will vary by batch and by manufacturer. But of the superfoods, I think it is technically considered the highest in antioxidant properties. It's a very rich source of vitamin E. We don't think about plant foods as getting healthy fats, but it has one of the higher fat contents of plant foods. And then it's just very rich in a number of nutrients: calcium, magnesium, potassium. It is a good source of copper, and also contains arabinogalactin, which, as we know, is a great ingredient in foods that help support immune system, for one. The thing that you need to be aware of with acai is that it naturally is a very bitter tasting food. So you're not going to see consumers wanting to take this in its pure, added food, sugar added basically form. So that's the thing to watch out for with acai, is that in order to be able to actually really consume it, it does have to be sweetened. It's just not tolerable. It's very bitter. So the trick is to find acai foods if people want to, try to add it into the diet for the nutrient density. To watch out for the sugar content and try to find forms of the juices or other products that are, manageable in terms of the number of sugar grams per serving. So a lot of these superfood juices that you were, used to see a lot of, they're still around. Just, make sure that if a client is using an acai product, that you just kind of give them a little quick education on the fact that a lot of them are very sweet, and to make sure that they're following the serving size. So a lot of times it's an ounce, and people are pouring half of a juice glass full. So just even though it's very rich in nutrients, you got to be careful and just make sure to watch out for sugars. And we do really strongly recommend looking for organic and wildcrafted sources. Are supposed to be the two things that you look for in acai to make sure that you have a very clean, high quality source of it. So that's acai. A newer superfood on the scene, really more in the last couple of years, is maca, and not to be confused with matcha, which is green tea. So this is maca, and it is a higher protein food than a lot of other plant foods. Maca is considered, I think, the highest percentage of protein in, in a non-grain, in a fruit or vegetable type of food. And it comes to us also from South America, from Peru. In Peruvian culture, the maca plant was very highly prized for its effects on libido and fertility. Basically, what it comes down to today for use as a superfood, you generally find this in a powdered form. Maca is a root. It's a radish family. Again, it does have polyunsaturated fats. And what's neat about maca is it has a pretty high plant sterol content, from what I understand. So that means that it have good effects on, helping manage lipids, most likely. Most of these superfoods are like any other fruit or vegetable. They're a decent source of fiber. And these are the nutrients that are listed, that it's being as an excellent source of calcium and magnesium, phosphorus and potassium, and a good source of sulfur. It does contain some sodium, It shouldn't be too much even for people that need to, watch their sodium, because it's just an amount in a somewhat higher sodium plant food, kind of like celery. But it's a good source of other a lot of trace minerals, so iron, zinc, copper, selenium, manganese, and so forth. Silicon now kind of being one that has a benefit for hair and bones. So this actually, if you look at some of the pricing on some of these superfoods, this can be one of the more expensive ones. To buy a pound bag of it, you're looking at about $45 on average. I did try to include some of the references for you here and there, so that is the other thing to try to keep a feel for is there any actual validation for the product. And actually this study that I cited here was a study that actually documented that it can help libido and actually help fertility. So the thing that it was traditionally used for has been proven out in some studies. But what I like about maca is that it is a powder that goes well. It would add well into protein shakes. So, a lot of times when people are using protein powder in the morning and they're mixing it with, almond milk or rice milk, between the protein and the milk, there's not a lot of other nutrient density. So people try throwing fruit in there, but if you throw a lot of fruit in, then you've raised the carb intake a lot. Maca is nice because it is something that can increase the nutrient density of a protein shake without raising the glycemic effect. So, it's kind of a neat superfood. I don't go around, touting a lot of use of superfoods, but if people want a recommendation for one and they want to know if it's worth it, maca, if people can afford it, is I like it because it comes from a vegetable instead of a fruit. And, like I said, it mixes well in protein shakes and can increase the nutrient density. So I would have no problem with patients using maca at all if they can afford it. Okay, moving on here. Next one I want to talk about is mangosteen. So mangosteen is another one that's a fruit. A lot of these superfoods are fruits. This comes from Pacific Rim countries. Really specifically, it mainly comes from Thailand. It is rich in something called xanthones, and mainly those are just, another type of plant antioxidant with very strong anti-inflammatory effects. Mangosteen was one of the first superfoods that came on the scene, and some of these drinks had acai and mangosteen and maybe noni, something like that, and they mixed them all together and put them in fruit juice. Nowadays, people are more aware of that sugar issue, and when I'm seeing mangosteen in the stores and everything now, it is usually just pure mangosteen. It's sweet enough on its own, so it's typically, a lot of times it's pretty easy to find it unsweetened, which is good. The only thing I want to make you aware of, and this is actually Mike Adams on the website, Natural News, he calls himself the Health Ranger. He is actually, I don't like all of his fear-mongering that the site tends to do, but he's actually one of the better sources now for information on superfoods. And he is the one that kind of broke the story, and it was something that was a concern of mine when superfoods kind of first came on the scene, because knowing kind of as an insider in the industry some of the purity issues that we have with ingredients coming from some of these other countries, and the tendency for those people who grow it and sell it from those countries, knowing that if they can slip just a little bit of some kind of filler in there, they can get more money for less pure ingredient, and knowing that they don't have the quality standards that we do for purity. I've always been really super concerned about contamination issues with superfoods. Part of the reason is because when I first started reading about acai, I happened to find online some photos of acai berries sitting in, open containers where they were getting ready to get shipped off, and they actually reported, maybe rodents and rats crawling around on them and that type of thing, and until they get to the source, and who knows if they're properly, washed and things like that. So anyway, that I've always had this concern, and sure enough, Mike Adams has been kind of on this as well, and he recently started a forensic lab. He calls it a forensic food lab, I think. But you can, if you go on to Mike Adams Natural News and search, you'll find links for getting to his lab results. And anyway, the story was that he tested mangosteen, several different manufacturers, brands. Most of them, they use mangosteen from Thailand, and there were very high levels of lead. Oh, I left that word out of there, did I? Yeah, 100 times the typical levels for lead. And what he reported there was a lot of superfoods or different types of food and dietary supplement ingredients, just because of pollution issues around the globe, they will almost all have a somewhat contain some heavy metals. That's just a fact of life, unfortunately for us today. But the amount in this mangosteen coming in was 100 times the typical levels, which are, in there but low, but actually 200 times higher than what the raw ingredients supplier claimed. So the point here is that they claimed that they had done an analysis on the raw material, and that it was a very low, even less than average amount of lead, when in fact it was 200 times higher than what they claimed, and 100 times higher than typical levels. So this is an issue. This is something we need to keep our eye on. We have a great resource here. This is somebody who is making this their job to kind of look out for these types of issues with, dietary supplement and superfood ingredients. So just keep an eye out. Mangosteen has tremendous nutritional value, like other superfoods. It can be anti-inflammatory, but you got to make sure that it's pure and that's not contaminated. Okay, goji berries. I'll never forget when I first heard about goji berries. I heard about them from Carol, our gal in our building back in our clinic in Ohio that was an wonderful acupuncturist that we had as a resource there, and she talked about how highly prized goji berries were in China, kind of almost as prized or more as, say, ginseng, as something that's very, very good for helping to build robust health. And part of it, again, is just because it is such a nutrient-dense food. So these are some of the nutrients that it's particularly good sources for. And again, it's what I find interesting about some of these superfoods is that these are plants that have a little bit higher protein content. And as we know, if you've tuned in on my other webinars, one of the advantages of having a little bit of protein in with these carbohydrate foods and meals is that it helps balance the glycemic response. So that's one of the benefits of goji berries. It has a pretty high protein content, and it is a wonderful nutrient-dense food. I buy goji berries every so often. They are not cheap. I didn't put the price down here, but I've seen as high as like $17, $20 or so for a little, maybe 6-8 ounce bag of them, not even a pound. So they're expensive. I don't eat them like they're going out of style, but what I like is I like to put them on salads for something different, to put a different flavor into the salads. They have an interesting kind of flavor. It's hard to describe if you've never tried them, but they complement well in salads. And it's a way to increase the nutrient density, especially if I know I'm not having a real dark, deep, leafy green and I've just been lazy and using romaine or something, you know. One of the things to be aware of with goji berries is they are a member of the family. So if you have clients who they know they have problems with nightshades, just make a little mental note to self that you know, you want to make sure to add goji berries as one of the nightshade family foods if you have a office handout. Goji berries are way lower in sugars. For example, I sort of think of them as equivalent to almost like a raisin, something like that on a salad. Well, as we know, raisins are delicious and everything, but they are pretty high glycemic. So you really want to sprinkle them on lightly so that we don't overdo it on the carbs. And whereas with goji berries, they're lower in carb per serving. So they work out a little better that way. So just some tidbits of information on goji berries. But they are a valuable superfood. I do consider them one, and I think they're good. Okay, again, if you can afford them. All right, blueberries. You know, blueberries really kind of, it's been several years that they really kind of came into, you know, the headlines, how nutrient dense they were, how great blueberries were and are for us. They're really actually not super high in lutein. There are other foods that are higher, but they do contain some lutein. They're also really good sources of the very health-valued anthocyanins that everybody's coming to realize how good that category of phytonutrient is for human health. They're also a good source of ellagic acid along with other berries. Ellagic acid, as you may have heard, or if not, this will be new to you, but ellagic acid is one of the strongest anti-cancer compounds in foods that there is. It has a very strong apoptosis effect, so causing death of actual cancer cells. And there is a lot of study on ellagic acid, in particular ellagic acid from raspberries, but it's the same compound, whether it's from blackberries, raspberries. Actually, walnuts contain some ellagic acid, and so do pomegranates. So we have several foods that can be a source of this extremely valuable anti-cancer compound. In fact, I think I read in one of the bits of information, one of the studies cited about ellagic acid was that a cup a day could actually prevent cancer. 1 cup of raspberries per day, not blueberries, but raspberries. So, but think of berries in general as great sources of anthocyanins and also good sources of these other nutrients I've listed and ellagic acid. So I have read that in terms of blueberries, they actually are, of the common fruits that people consume in the United States, blueberries actually have the highest antioxidants. So if you take out the exotic superfoods like acai, blueberries are supposedly highest according to some sources of information. So the thing I will tell you to watch out for with blueberries, even though they don't taste super sweet, for whatever reasons, the glycemic index is kind of high compared to the other berries. It's a little higher. Not double or anything, but you know, basically it's a great superfood, and it can be mixed in as our blend of wonderfully helpful, you know, very healthful plant foods. Just know that blackberries and raspberries have similar nutrient profiles, but they are lower in glycemic index. So, you know, it's just something to keep in mind. I have found that sometimes when people get caught on a food, they want to eat it and eat it and eat it. They find out it's healthy. Blueberries kind of seem to be one of those foods that people just love to get hooked on. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides later. But moving on, we'll talk about dark leafy greens. So you don't always see dark leafy greens on your different superfoods lists, but I've seen them on plenty of lists because you know, if you're talking really nutrient density, probably dark leafy greens are about as good of a deal as you can get in terms of the fact that they are extremely nutrient dense, containing, you know, beta-carotene and other carotenoids, vitamin K. They're a great source for vitamin K. They're high in magnesium, and they're great sources of folate. And actually, they're much higher in lutein. They're the highest in lutein, which of course is helpful and preventive for macular degeneration. So, and people kind of know lutein now. So actually, if people are thinking they're getting it in berries, dark leafy greens are a better source. So, and here's what, you know, what really matters in terms of food is your best deal nutritionally is when you can get a ton of nutrient density for hardly any calories. And that's what you get with dark leafy greens. Therefore, by very definition, they're alkalinizing. I don't know if some of you have heard in a couple of my other webinars, but this is something that I went through the research on. And basically, people are very concerned and understand now that our bodies operate much more efficiently. Our blood has to be kept at a certain pH level. And we tend to run somewhat acidic on modern diets because we're eating always a lot of calories, and so many of our calories have hardly any nutrients with them. And when we eat calories, we create, as a byproduct of metabolizing those calories, we create metabolic acids. And so when you eat a food that is not very many calories, but also has a lot of nutrients, you don't create metabolic acid. So over time of consuming plenty of these foods, they'll help alkalinize our bodies. So again, it's just a very good deal nutritionally when it's very few calories, and of course it falls in, dark leafies fall into the category of non-starchy vegetables, so almost no calories and a ton of, you know, micronutrients. So that's a good deal. Now, the point I'm trying to make with giving you this other information, such as, you know, goji berries being a nightshade, is that, you know, technically there really is not any one perfect, completely perfect food that couldn't become a problem in some way for some people, and especially if it's overconsumed. So that's kind of the warning that I have about superfoods. So what could possibly be a downside of a dark leafy green? Well, believe it or not, they're high in oxalates. Now, not everybody will have a problem with oxalates, but some people are at increased risk. And if you have clients, you know, that have a history of kidney stones, you wouldn't want them consuming a ton of dark leafy greens or high oxalate foods. You know, they're getting a little more sophisticated and finding out who will and who will not have a problem with oxalates, but they're still kind of figuring out, well, what makes some people at higher risk? One of the things that can influence it is toxicity from our environment. So if for whatever reasons you have clients that they're non-excretors, and we live in this world where we get a lot of cadmium exposure, well, apparently cadmium is one of the things that forces the metabolism of your vitamin C intake. Makes it convert into oxalic acid, believe it or not. So toxicity can be one of the things. And of course, they always throw out there, we may find genetically something that predisposes people toward this. And we know that low magnesium intake can predispose people towards problems for developing kidney stones. So it's not to say that everyone should be careful about eating too many dark leafy greens. It's just to say, if you do have people that you know have issues where oxalates are a problem, this is a food they won't want to eat a lot of. So just mainly the point being there's no one perfect food. Okay, green tea. Just about any superfood list I've ever seen, they always discuss green tea. It is wonderful for human health. It's high in the catechins, which are a type of polyphenol. a particular category. So we know that the active in green tea is e.g. epigallocatechin. Somebody else help me here. EGCGs. Very, very strong anti-cancer properties. So anti-angiogenesis. So this is another thing that happens with in cancer processes, is that we get damage to DNA, we get formation of cancer cells, we get those cancer cells proliferating, and one of the things that can really cause cancer to get promoted in the body is that it will start to develop blood supply and create vascularity to those cells. And once that happens, then the tumors can really take off, so, or the cancer cells can really grow. So one of the ways that foods can help us in the battle against, preventing or fighting cancer is that there are substances in food that will help reduce the ability of those cancerous cells to develop blood supply. So that's called anti-angiogenesis, and green tea, EGCG in green tea is one of the things that is known to do that. It's not the only one, but it's a very strong effect. Green tea is a natural source of theanine, highly prized dietary food ingredient in integrative medicine for its anti-anxiety properties. There are studies showing that, green tea is, anybody selling green tea wants to make sure that it makes it into the headlines that green tea can stimulate metabolic rate and may be a weight management benefit. However, I would make sure that, people understand that it is a very mild effect. It's a very small increase in metabolic rate. It's extremely easy to out-eat that little boost in metabolic rate from green tea. So if anybody thinks they're going to take green tea and drop a bunch of weight just from green tea, usually doesn't happen. At the most, we would see maybe a 10% weight loss, and that would be a pretty good outcome. We know that green tea is one substance that can stimulate NRF2 enzymes, which help promote detox pathways in the body and have a number of benefits. There is good, strong evidence on green tea for helping lower cardiovascular disease risk. However, I want people to understand if they say, hey, I read green tea helps lower cholesterol, it has to be with a good bit of intake. The anti-cancer properties are there with apparently taking in 2 or 3 cups a day. But if you're going after cardiovascular disease with green tea, you have to take in a lot, 5 cups or more. And again, not to sound like I want to be negative about superfoods. I don't want to be negative about them. I just want people to understand every single one of these just about has something that can be a downfall if it's overdone. Green tea is very high in tannins. And in fact, catechins are a type of tannin. Well, tannins are anti-nutrients. So that means that they block absorption of some of the nutrients, in particular, mainly the minerals like iron and other trace minerals, zinc, calcium. Any mineral can be blocked by intake of tannin. So on one hand, if we're blocking iron and we have people that we know that they're at risk of cardiovascular disease, well, maybe that could be a little bit of a benefit. But like anything, we have to know the client, right, or the patient. So if I have someone struggling with anemia, a woman who's menstrual, and all of a sudden they read, hey, green tea, healthy, 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 I'm drinking, 2-3 big tall glasses a day, they have to understand that, that might not be helping their anemia. So there are certain instances where intake of a lot of some of these foods might not be good, and this is one of them. So really it just is more validation for the fact that we need to understand our client, understand their health needs, and we need to do a good job of getting a grip on what their dietary intake is, not just foods, but beverages as well. Tannins also decrease the digestibility of proteins. So, you know, this can be an issue in terms of, say, possibly, you know, development of immune response or allergy issues, things like that. So in general, green tea, very healthy, but there would be certain instances where we would want to make sure people aren't taking in too much. Okay. All right. Cacao or cocoa, dark chocolate. Most people now are aware that, you know, dark chocolate can be healthy. The polyphenols in it, very, very high in antioxidant properties. Again, like I said, most of the superfoods, that's one of the benefits. If it's superfood and it's true, you know, one of the big benefits are the fact of the antioxidants. Cocoa is actually a good source of magnesium, which is one of the nutrients that, you know, people have a hard time really getting enough in. That's been shown in studies all over the place. But it's really gathered good evidence on, you know, lowering risk of different cardiovascular disease, risk of stroke, can help keep blood pressure managed, which makes sense just from the magnesium aspect alone. But it also helps our blood stay non-sticky, so it's anti-clotting, so lowering stroke risk. One of the big things about cocoa, if people can, if they can eat it, you know, no food allergy or sensitivity or anything to it, is that it really can mood. And you'll notice that with people who love their chocolate, they just, oh, it makes them feel so good, and they just look forward to it every day. So that's because it's got known substances in there that contribute to, you know, helping us feel stimulated and up and happy. And, you know, in fact, now, this isn't sorted out about cocoa, but in dark chocolate, you know, of course, most of them, they have to be sweetened, unless they're like 85%. They're very, very bitter. Some people like the real bitter dark chocolate. Some people don't. But there is evidence to show that cocoa can increase serotonin, which, of course, is wonderful, feeling calm and less anxious and, you know, feeling like all is right in your world. I always used to think it was just from the sugar in the chocolate, because we know that high carb foods will increase absorption of tryptophan, and that goes on to convert to serotonin. Well, I guess now there is some evidence that, you know, maybe cocoa raises serotonin, and it's not necessarily just from the sugar. It can just be from they don't know, from the pleasant taste that people enjoy or what. But anyway, that was interesting to me when I was kind of looking at newer research that may not be just from the sugar. Again, we have to watch toxicity. Again, on the Health Ranger Consumer Wellness Society that he's housed the forensic food lab in, they tested cocoa products from all different manufacturers and found quite a few of them were contaminated with high levels of lead. They tested, the products that I saw, they tested were cacao nibs and powders. So, you know, a lot of people like adding cacao nibs. We're some of them. We love adding them into protein shakes. They're really, really good, and it does boost the antioxidant and the health benefits, again, of, you know, of drinking that protein drink. And so you really do have to watch. We have to monitor, unfortunately, our food supply every step of the way. So just be aware of that. And again, the Forensic Food Lab is a good resource for that. Okay, where are we at here? Beans and legumes. You don't typically see beans and legumes on superfoods lists. I've seen them on some superfoods lists, not all. But I consider them a superfood. I really do. I know they're not a perfect food either, and I'll get that in a minute. But when you talk about being able to take in a little bit higher carbohydrate food, because of the fiber and protein, it really takes the edge off, and they're real low glycemic index and moderate glycemic load. And beans and legumes also are extremely high in antioxidants. They're a wonderful source of antioxidants. I didn't list all the other nutrients, but they're decent sources of magnesium and different minerals as well. But what I really like about beans and legumes is that in a diet where we are otherwise trying to really watch glycemic impact of our foods, we just have to. I mean, this is something, if people don't have the message yet, if clients don't have this message, we've got to get this message across. Really, our intake today, this is, you know, what increases health risk so much, is taking in too many carbs and too many high glycemic index carbs in particular. So here's a carb we can eat, low glycemic index, and it's a rich source of resistant starch, because when we take the edge off of our carbohydrate intake and we watch our total consumption of starchy foods too strictly, one of the things that can impact is our gut health, as I've discussed in past webinars. And so beans and legumes are very protective of gut health because of their resistant starch content. And that's why, for no other reason alone, that's why I consider them a true superfood, because they really are health protective in that regard. Now, there are people that don't like beans and legumes at all because of the lectins. But here's the point I want to make on that. If we are otherwise working with our clients and making sure that we're evaluating and addressing gut health as needed, and we always have an eye to that, the lectins in beans and legumes should not become a problem, because as long as you have a healthy mucin layer, that's one of the things that really protects against a problem from lectins. Lectins can cause agglutination in red blood cells. So if a person has leaky gut issues, and you know that in their health history, you find that they have all the a number of things that means that, you know, you've got to work on gut health in them, then I might be careful about eating too many beans and legumes. But a small amount can go a long way for protecting gut health. Cooking lowers the lectin content a lot. Beans and legumes also are high in goitrogens, which can be an issue for some people that are struggling to, you know, optimize their thyroid hormone activity and function in the body. But again, cooking breaks a lot of that goitrogen content down, and apparently fermentation helps that as well. We don't tend to eat a lot of fermented, say, like beans, but when you think in terms of soy being a legume, it definitely is healthier, known to be healthy. Shows some of the studies there. Next slide shows kind of some of the nutrients in different nuts and seeds. So let's go to the next slide, please. So what it is here is, I'm trying to make a point with this slide, and we're running out of time already, so I want to kind of try to get through quick, but use this slide as a reference, because I see patients that come in all the time and they say things like, oh, pistachios, oh no, they really are the best out of all the nuts, the pistachios. And, you know, I don't know why people have a tendency to want to have one food be the best. Maybe it's just because they like that particular nut or whatever. But if you look down this list, what do you notice? A lot of nuts and seeds are good sources of things like calcium, magnesium, trace minerals, selenium, manganese. Some of them might have a little more vitamin E, some of them might have thiamine, some of them might have B6, but there's a lot of common nutrients in them. They're all, you know, pretty decent source of fiber, especially chia. So there isn't really any one superfood, even when it comes to nuts and seeds. They're all super. They're all great. One of the seeds that I think people tend to think, oh, you know, it's not really that great, are sunflower seeds. But when you look at the list there, sunflower seeds are loaded. Sesame seeds are fantastic. They're a particularly good source of calcium. So if people can tolerate peanuts, I don't mind them throwing some peanuts into the mix. They're you know, we want organic ones for sure, but you know, lots of different nuts and seeds have great nutrient content. And I didn't list the ellagic acid on walnuts, but I should have. Okay, let's move on so we can get to a couple of other important points here before we wrap up. So when your people come to you and they say, you know, should I worry about taking in these superfoods? Just remember this list of all these nutrients and things like dark green leafies and beans. And here I've listed out just some of the nutrients and things like garlic. I mean, mushrooms, come on, you want to talk about a superstar for immune activation properties. Cruciferous vegetables, very, very strong for detoxification pathways and anti-cancer properties. But again, they're can be high in goitrogens. Cooking helps lower that. And don't forget about spices. These are superfoods too. And so if I have clients that, you know, they're coming in and they're barely able to afford their supplement bill, I'm going to tell them, you know, just eat regular foods. Don't worry about spending money on these expensive superfoods. There are plenty of ways to get in plenty of health-building properties with regular foods. You know, grab a box of green tea on sale and, you know, eat regular foods and you'll be fine. But on the other hand, like I said, you know, there are certain ways to use some of these superfoods added into protein shakes, things like that. Sure, take in all the nutrition you can, you know, if people want to, but they're certainly not necessary. Okay, let's move on quickly here. So we know that one of the biggest things we need to do with our diet is to promote anti-inflammatory properties, and this is where these types of foods kick in. Okay, let's move on quickly here. Dietary measures to reduce post-meal dysglycemia. One of the biggest things is take in a lot of fruits and vegetables. So take in nutrient-dense foods, beans, legumes, nuts, all those. And make sure that we fight inflammation in the body, and we certainly don't induce it with high glycemic foods. Okay, so if you look at a My Plate, again, this holds really true. Fill up that, you know, fill up the plates and bowls with a lot of those high nutrient dense plant foods. At least half of the plate with fruits and vegetables. And on the grains, they don't always have to be grains on there. That could be beans and legumes instead. And of course, dairy, we got to figure out if people are allergic or food sensitive, have food sensitivity to it or not. So that's how we deal with My Plate. Okay, so the benefits, you know, manganese and selenium are two of the most important trace minerals needed for the production of one of the most important detoxifying compounds in the body, superoxide dismutase in the liver. So these superfoods can help build, detox properties. Everybody's interested in that. So we don't have to go out and take a lot of heroic measures for detox. We just have to eat nutrient-dense foods. Same for alkalinizing. Just eat a lot of these foods every single day, and we don't necessarily have to undertake some of these other, more what we call more heroic measures to maintain alkalinity in the body. Nutrients like zinc support our immune system. We want these foods, compounds for anti-inflammatory, and who doesn't want to try and fight cancer? People are very concerned about cancer. People get really mad about cancer, and they think that, they're hiding cures. But then when it comes to eating well to actually fight it, don't think you're just going to take in that magic acai and do it. There are plenty of foods that have these anti-cancer properties. So yeah, there are a lot of benefits to these foods. Don't doubt it. Here's the one issue that I want to harp on a little bit, if I'm going to say anything. Marta, you can go ahead and go on to the next slide. I've talked about this effect of dysbiosis and overgrowth of yeast on the gut that happens, especially when people had to go on antibiotics for some reason, and all the metabolic effects that this can cause. Moving on, let me see, I won't get to the slide that I want to on this. Basically, the down road of all this is that, you can advance the slide, is that people become more prone to becoming sensitive to the allergenic proteins in foods. And this is a tremendous source of inflammation in the body. And the only point I want to make on this is, yes, wheat, yes, cow's milk, dairy, yes, eggs, yes, soy. These other foods are the most notable foods that can cause food sensitivity and food allergy responses in us, with all these things that predispose us to this issue of dysbiosis and the development of immune responses. But they're not the only foods. In fact, I've had several clients who have tested allergic when we do food sensitivity panels to blueberries. I've had clients and colleagues that have tested positive for allergenic response to raspberries. I've had people test positive for broccoli, So my point, a superfood, yes, they're super, but you can develop immune response to them like any other food. So the biggest, and let's go ahead and advance the slides, Marta. So food allergies are a big issue, and there are a number of things that can predispose us to these problems. And so my concern with superfoods is that this tendency that people have to want to get stuck on a food and eat too much of it and predispose themselves toward developing a problem with immune reactivity to it. So the one thing I would say is definitely screen your clients, and if you have clients that, now let's move the slides up because I have the slide with the list. Yeah, let's keep going and keep going. Here, go back. This is it. Go back a couple, please. One more, right there. So when you have clients that have allergies, already, they have seasonal allergy issues, or they have been prone toward other food allergies, when they have unexplained headaches, when they have joint and arthritis pain, when they have any autoimmune condition like Hashimoto's, thyroiditis, or if they're just some of these people that seem to have really, really, really stubborn weight, that taking carb load down hasn't helped. There's another source of big inflammation in the body in those instances, and typically it's gut related. So if I have clients that have anything in this category of health issues, I really, really, really encourage them to use food rotation. Don't get stuck on any one food, whether it's a superfood or not. Don't overindulge in it, don't over intake, because they're going to have more of a tendency to developing immune reactivity to anything that they consume a lot of, any food, healthy or not. Okay, moving on. And let's keep going. So I talked about the resistant starch in beans and legumes, and I just wanted to refer back to this resistant starch product. You can, if you do have people, or it's not technically resistant starch, it's a very slow digesting. They're still evaluating if it's truly like a resistant starch, but I've had it behave like resistant starch in a number of clients, so I consider it another source. So I'm just bringing this up because, you know, while beans and legumes are one of the best sources of resistant starch, if you have people that you really can't have them eating too many beans and legumes because of the rest of their health picture, there are other ways to get resistant starch in, the Vitargo product and UCAN, for example. Okay, moving on quickly here because we're going to wrap up. We're coming to the end of our hour. So you know that for all of us here at Practicing Metabolic Code and all the physicians and practitioners out there that are practicing according to these concepts, what we're trying to do is, you know, look at our nutrition intake from a little bit different lens. And, you know, the same holds true when it comes to superfoods. It doesn't matter if a food's nutrient dense. It helps a little bit. It helps take glycemic impact off. But, you know, some of these superfood juices, they pack them so full of sugars that they're still not appropriate for someone with an insulin resistance issue. And like I said, consider gut health, so that, you know, if you see people wanting to say, oh, I just saw that thing on walnuts, I've really been eating a lot of walnuts, it was great, you know, walnuts are great, they cure everything, whatever article they saw, just make sure you let people know walnuts are extremely healthy, for example, if this is a food that it comes up with. But there are plenty of other nuts and seeds that have really great nutrient profiles, and what we have to be careful of, especially in a nut and seed category, because those are highly allergenic, especially tree nuts, is that, you know, we don't want to eat just one because we could become reactive to it. So we really strongly recommend rotation of foods, and especially in nuts and seeds, because it's a, you know, highly allergenic category. So don't just get stuck on walnuts, but know that, you know, almonds have great nutrients, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, pecans, and any nut and seed, they have very similar nutrient profiles. There is no one nut that's going to be found to be the best. You know, they all have good benefits. So that's the point there. So, and then we do have to take in things like thyroid function, and we have to remember, you know, superfoods, like any other foods, have to be pure. They have to be uncontaminated, and we should look for organic versions and stick to those. So this all enters into our consideration, even with superfoods. Okay, we know from, hopefully you've joined me on other webinars, but for anybody that is new, what we have built into our Metabolic Code diet that we make available to practitioners is we have built the diet to be anti-inflammatory, strongly anti-inflammatory. Well, superfoods can help contribute to that. We have built into the diet to be low glycemic load. So when people want to do acai, I warn them against acai bowls because they are loaded with sugar. Yes, it'll have more nutrient density, say, than ice cream, but it's still loaded with sugar. So we got to be aware of that. I love some of those acai bowls, but one serving is enough, honestly, for 10 people. So we really have to take the quantity down. And then, as I've already talked about, we've got to keep in mind that any food can become a food that someone their immune system can react to. So we've got to watch out for that. Food rotation really helps with that. And we emphasize choosing organic as often as possible. So that's all built into our diet materials that we make available for practitioners. Okay, and I've pretty much talked about all of this. So let's go ahead and move on. So that's a summary of what our metabolic code health program is. It's not just diet, but one of the things we found for integrative practitioners of different types is that people think supplements will do everything for them, and they won't. We've got to really strongly support our health by making the needed modifications in diet as well. So it's all of the things that we need to consider with our food intake, and then using supplements to help redirect body chemistry and get the body back on track metabolically. Okay, let's move past these. I just want to get to our final summary slide. I'm not sure how many of you have joined us before, but if we have some new people on here, we make our diet available through our product, which we call Lifestyle Guidance Portal. And what that is an online way to get diet information to your clients. So you don't have to hand out a ton of printouts anymore. You can let them know that you can sign them up with an email, and they have all menus, recipes, everything laid out for them to understand the rationale behind what they need to do for diet and all the support material to accomplish it, because we're busy. It's we have to see as many patients as we can see to remain profitable. And what the Lifestyle Guidance Portal does is it allows you to say, I wanted to spend more time talking to you about your supplements today and what I want to do with your health, but diet is super important. If you don't mind, I'm going to sign you up for our online diet materials, and it explains everything that I want you to do with diet. And it takes a whole lot of time of sitting there explaining diet ad nauseum off of your plate. And what I usually do is I ask clients to, I'll sign it. I ask them to look it over, do the best they can with the menus and doing it, and I let them know that I'll answer any questions they have as they look it over at their next appointment. So it's a real quick way to cover what you need to cover and get people headed in the right direction on their diet. Okay, thank you all so much for joining me. I hope you learned something you didn't know before about some of the superfoods and what we need to watch out for with them. Next time, I want to talk about something I haven't addressed specifically yet, and that's what do we do to try to prevent cancer, reduce our risk, or I also want to talk about if you have clients coming in that have existing cancer, what should we really tell them to focus on and what's most helpful for them when it comes to diet at that point. So that's what we'll be talking about next time. I hope you'll join us, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, we have a few questions, Laura. This is Marta.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just wanted to open it up and read the few that have been waiting. We appreciate your patience. So the first question is about heavy metals, and if there's a specific type of mangosteen that you'd recommend. And this doctor does testing for heavy metals with his patients.
I don't really specifically personally recommend a lot of superfoods. I really just respond if my clients want to use them. But on the one slide, I did have the name, and again, it's Consumer Wellness Society, I think was the name of it. But I know for sure you can look up Forensic Food Lab. This is the lab opened and now operating that Mike Adams opened up, and I really appreciated it because it gives us a resource. And I can't remember, but he has the specific manufacturers listed on there, and he listed out the mangosteen products that were clean. And you can pick up brand names from there. I'm sorry I don't remember them, but you can get it from there.
Great, thank you. Okay, there's another question. Is potato starch a good resistant starch when added to cold water or cold water smoothies? Or cold smoothies, not cold water, cold smoothies.
Here's the story. So if you have a potato that you just cooked let's say, not too long before, and you want to throw it in something cold, it's not as effective. What creates resistant starch in potatoes is when they've been cooked, and especially when they've been cooked in water. So water does help, but then you take it out of the water and it completely cools, because you need time for this process to happen. What happens is the starch and moisture creates a kind of a gelatinous type structure to the starch. The starch gets kind of caught up with the moisture and gelatinizes, and that gelatin-like formed starch is what is hard to digest, harder for the body to digest, and therefore it turns it into a resistant starch. But it doesn't happen really quickly, to my understanding. So you need a period of time for that gelatinization process to take place. Just putting it in cold water, I don't think you'll get formation of a lot of resistant starch. No. It has to just happen as the potato cools down, and it would take a good couple of hours, I would think, for the resistant starch to form better.
Okay, Laura, I think...
Good question.
Yeah, I think this question, they're asking about the powder form. So you know the potato starch that comes in the, like, Bob's Red Mill potato starch?
Yes,
yeah,
yes. My understanding is no.
Yeah.
You could, in fact, I'll try to look this up. If we want to take a name, I can try to email a little more information. But
sure.
My understanding is if you took that type of starch and you added water into it, even with that, it would still take time for it to gelatinize. So it wouldn't happen quickly, but I'll try to find out more on that.
Okay, and I have the email, so we can
okay,
get back to you. Thank you so much. Any other questions? I'm going to allow just a few more. Anyone else has anything? All right. So thank you so much for attending tonight. And as I mentioned, we're going to have this posted on metaboliccode.com/blog within 24 to 48 hours. Also, if you would like to try the diets on your patients, you can subscribe by going to metaboliccode.com/join-now, and you'll see the link that says join now when you go to our website. But you can join for 30 days free and enroll unlimited numbers of patients on our lifestyle guidance portal. And you can have a chance to see the diet materials and just see how your patients can track their intake. So that's available for you right now for 30 days free trial. So thanks again, Laura. Thank you so much. Make sure you register for our next webinar, as Laura mentioned, Diet and Cancer, How to Reduce Risk and Diet for Existing Cancer. And you can register again at our site, metaboliccode.com. You'll see the events link. Thanks a lot and have a great evening, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.